Hello, everybody. My name is Cam Niger with Blue Sky Training, and welcome to this podcast where we have a special guest with us today. This episode of the Home Performance Advocates. We have with us Amanda Hatherly from BPI. So, Amanda, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what your role is at BPI?
I am the CEO of BPI. I've been here almost a year. Next week it will be a year. I took over from Larry Zarka, who had a fabulous time leading BPI for many years and had big shoes to fill, and it's been really fun.
Congrats on a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sweet. And what were you doing before you were in the role as CEO?
Do you want me to start sort of how I got into the industry, or just most recently, what makes sense for you?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and start where you got into the industry?
Okay.
Yeah, what brought you into building performance and home performance in general?
Yeah, so I was working, my husband's a contractor, and I was working for some years doing like project documentation. I did a lot of photography. And around 2006, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and our city brought in a green building code that required a HERS rater for all new construction. And there weren't very many HERS raters in town, and I thought I'll get trained. And coincidentally, the organization I did the training with was outside of New Mexico, because we really didn't have any training organizations. And they also did BPI training. And so I just went up to Montana, did both at the same time. And it's sort of a light bulb went off. It was that there's a way more existing homes than there are new homes being built. And there's much more of an issue with existing homes, from an environmental point, from health and safety. So I came back to New Mexico and started a small energy auditing company. And while I was doing that, because at that stage, I was the only BPI anything in New Mexico. We didn't have any BPI anything.
Yeah.
And so our weatherization program in the state asked if I'd do some BPI training for them. So I quickly learned how to put together curriculum and started doing training around the state. And then a couple of years later, there was a massive grant for weatherization training centers from the Department of Energy, and New Mexico won one of the awards. So they hired me as the director. And so for about 12 years, I managed the training center that was in Santa Fe at Santa Fe Community College with some fantastic partners. Shout out to Bill and Becca Ekman and Jeff Granger, who, together we put together what I think was a fabulous training center. And we were the main training center for 8 states and 2 territories for years. And we also did utility training at the time. We were doing commercial energy efficiency water training. And then I moved to California for a couple of years to work for a program implementer for utility programs and did workforce training through them. And then I came to BPI.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. You saw the need, filled it with the home, you knew the homes needed to perform well. I like that when you said there's a lot more old homes than new homes. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That kind of sums up a lot of importance of building performance in general.
Yeah.
What if you had to pick a topic that's kind of one that stands out to you, either with something energy efficiency related, a type of insulation, or something health and safety related, whether it be radon, asbestos, or, ventilation. So any kind of topic within the broad spectrum of building performance, what would you say is your favorite topic to put some study into?
Mine is indoor air quality and, moisture, mold, VOCs. I'm certainly not an expert, but it's something I love delving into. And I've got all kinds of different air quality monitors and wander around with my little Aranet 4, which is a carbon dioxide monitor. So I think, to me, that's my favorite topic, but I can sort of go down a rabbit hole. Yesterday, I was going down this massive rabbit hole with 4 or 5 industry experts on dense packed cellulose versus loose fill cellulose and what the R values are for those, because it seems like they're all over the place. There's no alignment, including, we're looking at our building science principles course at the, what Oak Ridge might recommend, what Building America recommends, what ResNet recommends, what the Dorsey and Krieger book recommended it. I finally reached out to Alison Bales to ask him.
Yeah. There's always
It's fun. Building science and healthy homes is just such a fabulous topic to get into.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm working on the Healthy Homes Evaluator, some training for that right now. So I'm in that world of indoor air quality. I'm with you. I love that study. It's a great study, and yeah, really emphasizes well how the house works together as a system.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. When you were first stepping into your role as CEO at BPI, were there any challenges that you faced moving into that position?
I think the biggest challenge for me was that I've been really involved in so many aspects of BPI from the outside, and the training center, the proctoring, working, everything. And then I was on the board for 6 years, but moving inside BPI, it's astounding to me how I didn't realize the level of rigor that has to go into the creation and sort of the updates to certifications and standards to make sure they're sort of aligned with ANSI or ANSI processes. It's so in-depth and rigorous, and I really didn't understand that. And I think that was sort of the biggest thing that hit me in the face.
Yeah, those accreditation pieces. That's a bit. And then what about now that you've been in the role for about a year, what are some really rewarding pieces that you've seen come from that?
I would say like being able to represent an organization that is so integral to the industry and also has been like so integral to my career. That's super rewarding. And then just being able to help people, and they call with questions or they email me with a question, and then all the connections I'm making.
Yeah, that's awesome. This is kind of off the top of my head, but I'm just wondering, how big is your maybe direct team at BPI of who you work with?
I think we just had a couple of people. I think it's 24 key staff at BPI, and the director team is maybe 7 of us is the director team, but you end up working with everybody because it's a small group. And something people really get confused about with BPI is we're a nonprofit. And then the other thing everybody gets confused about is we don't do any training. We rely on organizations like yours for all of the quality training that sort of supports the industry. We just do the standards, and we just do the certifications and certificates.
Yeah. How does that, if you want to go into more detail, and Parker, or Chance, feel free to also jump in from a training center side. How does that relationship work? And maybe are there any ever like miscommunications that are common, or is that or benefits to doing it that way, of having that kind of partnership model with training centers and BPI setting the standards?
From the BPI perspective, because we're an ANSI standards organization, we're not allowed to do training. So we have to have sort of a firewall between us and training. So we don't evaluate training, we don't create training materials for any of the certifications. That has to be done by organizations that aren't us. But we then use, we have test centers, and those test centers, obviously have training wings to them, but we interact with, like, for example, Blue Sky as a test center to BPI. And to become a test center, you have to, there's a lot of different requirements around quality and control and how you manage the testing environment. And then we have proctors that also sign agreements with us that they will work to, the ANSI requirements of keeping the exam secure and confidential and completely above board. So we have, that's our relationship with the test centers, and then they have the relationship of training of people completely apart from us. Right?
I'll jump in here real quick, just as because I think it's a very good relationship, at least what we've found, right? And Amanda, thanks for always being very responsive and your team and stuff like that. But one thing I do wish selfishly was that you were able to look at our curriculums and stuff like that, because we do a ton of research and everything to make sure everything aligns, right? And just having that one little check would be wonderful. I know you can't, but selfishly, I wish that we could, pass it through by you and just say like, hey, would you recommend anything else? Like that would be, it would be cool. But I know you
I remember being in exactly your situation at Santa Fe with that same sort of desire, as like, we put this all together. Is it really meeting the mark? But we're not allowed to.
Yeah.
And luckily we have relationships with local SMEs or other training organizations that we can bounce these ideas off of and kind of do like a peer review process almost. So it's not like there's no resources out there, but
Yeah. And it's really hard. I found when I was developing curriculum in Santa Fe, that one of the really difficult things was finding like the photos and the resources for all of that information. That was, to me, one of the hardest parts.
Yeah.
And we're lucky with Eris that Eris does a whole bunch of assessments and things like that out in the real world. And so we have a whole bunch of pictures to choose from. So we are actually very lucky in that respect. With Blue Sky's partnership with Eris with that. So.
Something I'm curious, Amanda, what do you, from the BPI perspective, see as kind of the biggest gap for training, countrywide? Obviously there's been a big pickup on heat pump related trainings, electrification related trainings, just because they're getting pushed out into the market with all the rebate programs and incentives that are out there currently. But do you kind of sit back with the 10,000 foot view and say, I think there's a gap in this trade or in this particular skill that you don't really see particularly getting filled as much as you would like to?
I do think that the whole heat pump is causing like big consternation around the country. I know that the DOE came out recently and was saying, I think 85% of heat pumps they evaluate have been installed in some way incorrectly. And there's a big gap. And one of the reasons I know, I think maybe if you want to talk about it now, we just recently developed a cold climate air source heat pump assessor certificate. And one of the reasons for that was because when you are either a contractor or you're an HVAC, technician or designer, typically up until now, you either put in a heat pump into a brand new home, and then after that, you would just go in if it was, fix it. If it was breaking, you'd replace it. But there wasn't a lot of fuel switching going on or using dual fuel setups. And so when you now have programs, wanting to either, add in a heat pump or take it out the furnace and put in a brand new heat pump, it's a completely different beast from what most contractors are used to. And so there's a lot of different evaluations that you have to do. So I feel like not just for cold climates, but also, the South and Florida, if they're going from electric strip heating to a heat pump, there's just a lot that needs to be taken into account. And I think that's the training gap. And I know that you're so filling that with some of your work right now.
And so is the goal with that, Amanda, the target population, mainly the energy assessor, or would you also recommend it to, like you said, HVAC technicians, entry-level contractors?
Yeah, I would say HVAC technicians. I mean, it's not expecting you to go and be like an installer or a designer. But if you were an installer and a designer and you added that on top of your existing sort of basis of knowledge, you'd have this extra little component that you may not have previously considered. So I think it's valuable.
Yeah. Who have you seen pick up on it so far? Has it been the energy assessment crowd or, for that pilot program? I just took the test this week. So, but I designed training for it. So I'm not necessarily, I'm like going to be delivering it, training in some form for it. So I'm not actually going to be in the field using it as much.
Yeah, it's we developed it for a utility implementation program up in the Northeast, and it wasn't specifically like tailored to them per se, because we use people from around the country to help inform the content. But because they, had asked and funded the development of it, a lot of their contractors, I think about 70 or so of their contractors in their program that are either auditors or HVAC people took it. And this was still in the pilot phase, but I do know from the responses back, they felt it was very valuable. The vast majority said that they would have loved to have had some training before they'd taken it. And I think the sense that we got from the questionnaire was that it was valuable for them. And so we also had some of the people who took it say, oh, this was too easy, but I think some of those might have been the subject matter experts that also took the exam.
Yeah.
And
Help make the test, and they're like, it's too easy.
And way too easy.
Amanda, when you say that they would have liked to have more training before, is that like hands-on training? Or is it just BPI?
Yeah, we didn't have any training. So they just took the exam cold.
Okay. So training around the course.
Yeah.
Or the test, sorry.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, we've been doing a bunch of hands-on heat pump training for everyone from, people coming into the industry all the way up to people who have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think your new certificate would be a wonderful addition to some of those hands-on trainings as well.
Yeah. Oh, great. I'm glad.
Yeah, to have that assessment piece, and then also, have that technician piece on that side. That is good.
Yeah.
Now, as far as standards and credentials go, we've had now a little bit of a peek behind the scene. I didn't know that you couldn't interact with test centers because of ANSI. That's really helpful.
Training side.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's super helpful for me to know, like just a format and how that works and how you're designing standards and credentials.
Yeah.
How does the process go from, maybe start to finish on designing a new credential or a set of standards? And you can use the heat pump one as a format if you want to use that as an example.
I'll use the energy auditor one only because we are doing a pilot, and that's one that a lot of people know about. So it's so complicated, and it's also BPI doesn't write the exams. We don't make any of this up ourselves, and people often say your exams are too hard, you make them too hard. But we have, first of all, we convene subject matter experts from around the country, and they are supposed to be a broad group. So we'll try and have manufacturing represented, like utility implementers or programs, contractors, general subject matter experts, maybe someone from government, who else, trainers, and that core group of people who volunteer their time, they will, over a period of time, work to put together the standard or the guideline or the protocol, whatever it is that we're developing. So, for example, with the energy auditor, the original group actually, wrote that whole standard, and now every 5 years, a new group or with some of those existing people comes together and they review it. After the exams, after the standard has been created, and it has to be consensus based, so that manufacturers have to agree with the contractors, have to agree with the trainers that yes, this is the process, or this is what should be in the standard. After that, it goes out for a public comment, and the public get to read it, and then they can give feedback, and those comments get addressed by the subject matter experts, and they say yes, no, maybe, let's discuss further. And when those have been resolved, the standard gets published, and then that's a standard that's out in public, and it gets revised and reviewed in an ongoing manner. And then when we develop the credential, what we do is similar process with subject matter experts. They come together and decide, here's the knowledge and skills and abilities that this person needs to do. Here's the list of knowledge, depending on if we're doing a certificate or a certification. And then once they've agreed that here's the list of knowledge, skills, and abilities, then they develop exam questions that relate to those different areas. And then the same thing happens where it doesn't go out to public comment because then everyone would see the questions, but instead it goes out to a pilot where people take the exam, and then after we've had, I think, usually about 100 people with a written exam, for example, then a psychometrician we hired comes in and they will evaluate how people answered each question, the background of the people, how they answered the questions, and it's very complicated.
Yeah.
And then they work with subject matter experts to say, like, here's why they aren't. Is this correct that they would have answered this based on this background that this person has? And it eventually, that process gets wrapped up, and then the real exam gets published. And from then on, that's the exam, and it goes through periodic review where we look in the back end. Is everyone getting one question wrong? What's the problem with that question? Or is everyone like easily getting this one right and nobody's even choosing any of the other answers, in which case maybe that one is too much of a gimme. And so that's sort of an ongoing process also. So yeah, it's much more complicated than I had really thought about beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Sounds
a
like
lot.
it. Yeah, that's a lot.
How long does that process usually take? Like for the heat pump one, for example, when did you first start?
That one, because it was just the certificate of knowledge, it's so far, we started it in April. We think it will be wrapped up by sometime, it'll be published sometime in November. But having said that, that's sort of a certificate of knowledge, which is an open book, online exam. The certifications are, I would say at least twice that. And then a standard is usually a year or a couple of years. They're really long processes. And I have like dreams of having lots and lots of money to be able to go back and like do more revisions on, and do updates and that type of thing. But it's all, also very expensive. So we rely on, funders and people who are generous to help us with some of this.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, speaking on funding, and whatever, obviously whatever you don't want to talk about is fine. How has that been this year? Like, is funding shifted or changed in the last year or two drastically, or you've had to rework stuff at all?
So there were a couple of proposals that we had just put in that weren't even considered, like a lot of people in like new administration. It was just different priorities. So those were sort of, we hadn't sort of started scaling up. We had one proposal, one grant that we were a sub on that we just heard got terminated. It wasn't a big role, but it was a pretty cool role. But in general, I feel like we've had a really good year this year, just maintaining and, a lot of people pushing out building science principles and then that building analyst, technician and professional, that track. They're so valuable. And I think that no matter, what's happening at the federal level, people see the need for obviously fixing up all these old buildings around the country.
This concludes part 1 of our conversation with Amanda Hatherly, the CEO of BPI. If you want to be updated on when part 2 is coming out, make sure to follow us on YouTube or Spotify so that you're always updated for a new episode of the Home Performance Advocate podcast. Thank you for listening.